Hello, learners. I am New Monica. Here we are in my second amateur educational YouTube video. My nephew is a major fan of the Assassin's Creed games, and I enjoy them greatly, provided I turn off the history gland of my brain. They are great games, but for a moment let's take a step back and look at the history. Looking at the real history can give us some great foundations for creating some incredible works of fiction. Truth is always more incredible than fiction simply because it actually happened. So let's look at the history for more kernels to draw out. The Assassin's Creed games tell the story of the ongoing struggle between the Order of Assassins and the Knights Templar. So already we have two things to look at. What were these organizations in reality? First, the Assassins. The Arabic name for assassins was Assassiyun, which literally translates as fundamentalist. The Assassiyun were an order formed within the community of the Nizari Muslims. The Nizari were a splinter group of the Ismaili Muslims, who were in turn a splinter group of the Shia Muslims. The Assassiyun were founded to protect the interests and well-being of the Nizari in particular, but were also rather protective of their Ismaili brethren. Interestingly, they were also a charitable organization and were involved in protecting trade routes. They were best known for, as the term has been inherited, assassinations. However, the reasons for their use of assassination tactics often gets missed. The Assassiyun lived in a heavily fractious political environment in a constant state of warfare. Many military and political leaders were burdened by horrendous blood feuds caused by their own military actions. The Assassiyun, meanwhile, would carefully plot out what objectives they had and take the least aggressive and destructive means that had a solid chance of achieving their goals. Most often, death wasn't required. In many cases, one could ask very politely. Hard cases might require intimidation. Sometimes it required sabotage. It was only when there was no choice that they would kill someone, and they would only kill those people absolutely vital to the achievement of the objective. This behavior, coupled with their defense of the trade routes and protection of the underclasses, led to people having very high views of them and prevented them from suffering the blood feuds that most power players in the Holy Land suffered. It also allowed the Nizari to grow to considerable wealth, despite the fact that the Sunnis absolutely despised them. The Shia were, in many ways, the underdogs of the Muslim world at the time, and the Nizari grew to great wealth. This made the Sunni Muslims hate them even more. The Assassiyun, in protecting the Nizari from the most powerful Muslim political forces in the Holy Land, failed to cause enough harm to earn blood feuds, and their protection of the poor and the helpless and the defense of trade routes made them many friends. As a brief note, the Assassiyun were founded by Hassan-i Sabah, who did live in Alamut. Hassan-i Sabah was not the old man of the mountain, however. That was his successor, Rashid ad-Din. As another side note, some people refer to the Assassiyun as the Hashashin. Hashashin is a term that essentially means drug addict. This false etymology was first used in 1122 by Caliph al-Amir as a smear against the Syrian Nizari. It was not used by the Nizari to describe their own holy guard. On the other side of this battle of the ages, you have the Knights Templar. Known in full as the poor fellow soldiers of Jesus Christ and the Temple of Solomon, these were knights whose purpose was to protect pilgrims to, from, and within the Holy Land. This meant they often protected merchant convoys. They also ended up holding marketplaces and ports, which meant that they had their fingers in a great deal of commerce. The Knights Templar grew quite rich off of their oversight of commercial activities. Peculiarly, they were not the kind of religious fundamentalists many other sources would point to. Indeed, many Templars were actually educated by Muslims. There's some evidence to suggest that the so-called demonic names that the Templars supposedly atoned in the satanic rites they were accused of at the end of their existence were actually Arabic terms for academic concepts as heard by people who didn't know the first thing about Arabic language or academia. In the end, the Knights Templar were a military organization, but they were mercantile in focus, protecting trade and, in the course of that protection, profiting from it. So, an order of merchant knights and an order of religious assassins. They must have lived in fear of each other, right? Nope. In fact, the Nizari and the Templars never came to blows. The Nizari were major traders and paid massive dues to the Templars for the use of their marketplaces and ports. Given the amount of profit the Nizari made off of these sites, it was almost a pro forma payout. They made an incredible amount of wealth off of this arrangement. However, in doing so, they also greatly expanded the value and economic power of the Templar marketplaces, so the Templars were profiting exceptionally from the arrangement. From the Assassian perspective, the Templars and the Christians generally did not bar them from access to the holy city of Jerusalem, which is something the Sunnis were likely to do. In essence, the Christians had kicked their enemies out of the Holy Land and in turn treated them far better. The Knights Templar, in particular, were staunch allies and supporters. There was little way to turn the Assassian into enemies of the Templars, because the Templars did little but further the well-being of the very people whose well-being the Assassian served. So overall, as it's likely already evident, Assassin's Creed hasn't so much taken liberties with history as ignored it in favor of their own story. This isn't by definition a bad thing, but it's good to recognize the fact so that you'll know what you can take as historical reality. Perhaps more interesting is the idea of this relationship between knight and assassin, and how this can be used to create some more unusual story ideas. This relationship is rarely treated in fiction at all, and when it is, it gets viewed as something abnormal and perhaps morally repugnant. A world in which assassins and knights are close allies and assist each other in their agendas makes for a very interesting setting, and even better the notion of the assassins being less a mercenary thug and more an active agent of mercy, taking action only because action must be taken, and taking care to ensure that as little harm gets done as possible. So this ends another delve into the realm of history and fantasy. Thank you for watching. I hope that you found this entertaining, or at least educational.